This is Emovora Audiobooks, bringing you original crime fiction from the far corners of the Australian Outback. Tonight, we're in Kalgoorlie, Western Australia, a town built on gold, grit, and fortunes made overnight. But out at the edge of a disused mining lease, one detective finds a death that was never meant to look like murder. This is Dust and Diesel. Kalgoorlie is a town that runs on gold and grit, the super pit visible from nearly anywhere, a vast open wound in the earth that has made fortunes and swallowed just as many. Where there's a fortune to be made honestly, there's usually a shadow economy trying to skim from the edges. This is the story of how Detective Inspector Farah Illich uncovered one such shadow and paid for it in sleepless nights long after the case closed. The find. A road train driver called it in at 4:40 a.m. A body slumped against the perimeter fence of a disused mining lease on the outskirts of town, half hidden by mulga scrub. The victim, later identified as Curtis Vane, was a 29-year-old FIFO worker, fly in, fly out, employed casually by several mining contractors around the region. Cause of death? An overdose, initially. A lethal combination of methamphetamine and a synthetic opioid, injected. Case seemingly closed before it opened, until the toxicology report noted something the attending doctor flagged as unusual. Bruising on both wrists, consistent with restraint, and puncture marks inconsistent with self-administration. Somebody held this young man down, Farah said, staring at the file. This wasn't an accident. This was made to look like one. FIFO culture and its underside. Farah's investigation led her into the strange, transient world of FIFO mining camps. Men and women flying in for 2-week swings, living in demountable accommodation, flush with cash, and far from the ordinary social structures that might otherwise catch someone slipping into trouble. It was, she quickly learned, also a lucrative market for illegal drugs. High wages, high stress, long, isolated shifts, and workers desperate for something to get them through the swing or help them come down afterward. Curtis Vane had a known history of minor drug offenses, but colleagues described him as trying to get clean, saving for a fresh start. Not someone who fit the profile of an overdose victim. Someone, instead, who might have made enemies by trying to leave a supply network behind. The camp. Farah, posing informally as a workplace safety auditor to gain initial access to the camp roster, with the mining company's full cooperation once she explained the real investigation, began quietly interviewing Curtis's crew. One name surfaced repeatedly with visible discomfort. A supervisor named Baz Farrow, well-liked on the surface, known for helping blokes out during rough patches, a euphemism, it turned out, for a modest but steady drug supply operation running through the camp, moved in via contractors' supply trucks that came and went from Perth with minimal inspection. Curtis owed him money, one worker admitted eventually, after Farah made clear his statement would remain confidential. But more than that, Curtis knew things. He'd started talking about going to management, maybe even police, about what Baz was running through the camp. Guys were getting hurt. One bloke nearly died a month before Curtis did. The confrontation. Physical evidence eventually tied Baz Farrow directly to the scene. Soil samples from his vehicle's tires matched the disused mining lease, and a burner phone recovered from his locker contained messages arranging a meeting with Curtis on the night of his death. Messages that, chillingly, discussed sorting him out in language the prosecution would later argue was a thin veil over premeditated intent. When Farah arrested him at the camp, in front of workers gathering for the morning shift change, Baz didn't resist, but he didn't apologize either. He was going to cost people their jobs. the whole site would have gone under scrutiny. I was protecting more than myself. You held a man down and gave him a fatal dose to protect a drug racket, Baz. There's no version of that where you're the protector. Baz Farrow was convicted of murder, and the case triggered a broader industry review of drug-related welfare risks across Western Australian FIFO mining sites, leading eventually to expanded support services for isolated workers. Detective Inspector Farah Illich later said the case unsettled her more than most, not because of its violence, but because of how quietly it had operated, hidden in plain sight, inside a system built to move enormous wealth out of the ground, but almost nothing in place to protect the people doing the digging. That was Dust and Diesel, only on Emavura audiobooks. If you're new here, welcome. Please consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. Our next and final story takes us to the very center of the continent, Alice Springs and the McDonnell Ranges, for the Red Center Line. Thanks so much for listening. See you there.